Thank you all very much for sticking around. This is the end of the end. I know it's been a long conference. This is my first NACIS. I've had an excellent time. So let's dive in. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some things I've had in my mind and kind of has influenced the way I've approached a little bit of mapping. And then I'm going to run through a prototype web map that myself and some of my colleagues put together. So we live in a pluralistic place, or at least right now we are in a pluralistic place. When I'm feeling pedantic or pessimistic, I'd say there's something that everyone cares about, and there's something that no one cares about. So sometimes this is good. Some people care about cooking sous vide, and some people care about the Seahawks fantasy draft. But there are some things that we all ought to care about. I'll argue today that climate change is one of those things. But the question arises, how do you convince someone to take a second look at these things that we all ought to care about? You could make it personal. How does this matter to me or to you? You can incentivize or gamify that attention, give some sort of reputation or token. Or you could say the same thing, but with animals. So this is not necessarily a new idea. Animals can communicate the significance of water conservation efforts, what that means more than a chart about the costs of municipal water purification. They can express the atrocities of war, of fear, and they can build empathy when oftentimes empathy for the people experiencing that conflict is slim. They can show the agony and the ecstasy of reuniting. More academically and more relatedly to what I'm going to talk about today, we could point to ideas from Shannon Mattern, this idea of lived multisensoriality. Mattern points here to a project from the Lower El Wakalam tribe, which mapped the kind of experience of fish migrating through a river. This concept conveys how animals might perceive, inhabit, and construct their habitat. And habitat is what we're going to be critically talking about today. So the project that I worked on is a web mapping prototype, very much in the tradition of moving fast and breaking things. That was a rough cut developed as part of a big data visualization course. This was taught by Sarah Williams and Carlos Sandoval at MIT the spring semester of this year. The objective here was to try to make sea level rise an issue that could matter to more people by connecting it between people and animals, by conflating these two issues. So this was a fairly normative, scrolling, storytelling sort of map. It started by establishing the location with 3 different categories of animals, birds, fish, and invertebrates, principally shrimp. This was using Mapbox as a heat map layer to show the environments based on some environmental sensitivity index data. And one of the fun things is that you can click anywhere and see the animals that live there, pulling an image from Flickr of what that animal looks like. So as you continue to scroll, the sea level rise exposure is shown. This is based on the NOAA sea level rise raster data. The census county boundaries are used as a proxy for human habitat here. And as you scroll through, each foot of sea level rise is labeled with the different projections of when that might happen. As you go through the map, we highlighted a couple different species that we thought told the story really well, one of which being the piping plover. We chose that because it was cute and also because it had a critical habitat here, some of its spawning grounds. We also later talked a bit about shrimp, which are not cute, but also have a really important economic aspect in the area. Quickly scrolling through, you can see 4 and 10 foot rise. So on the left, there's a grid of 240 species in the area, and as you hover over each of them, it shows the habitat where that species lives. You could then go back in and filter for that specific category of species and then click in to see a bit more. When you click on the habitat, it also brings up a little piece of information about the people living there, principally about homeownership and poverty. These are things that we might consider about mobility. If those homes go away, that's a major investment and could be a huge problem. Zooming to the end here, we wrap up the story with a different perspective, something a little bit more immediately tangible. We also give a couple immediate calls to action, what you can do about this. Generally speaking, it's reduce consumption and keep the conversation going. So the ingredients behind this, it's all running on Mapbox GL. We have a few base layers in Studio, but we load most of them in through the JavaScript library itself. For the grid, that shading and the hovering effects, we use D3, and then the Flickr API that pulls the Latin names of the animals, which we found pulling the common names was not as consistent. Additionally, the NOAA silverized data that was put together just through a raster tile server that I used a QGIS extension. And so cartographically, we're just using 10 levels of silverize. Sensitivity index taken from hard boundaries into a heat map, so it's a little bit fuzzier to represent what those habitats might actually be. And then the census counties simplified a little bit for the web, and then with some data attached. So like I said, this is very much a prototype. There's some room to add additional layers or organization, as well as increasing the performance, particularly of the tile layer. And something we were interested in but didn't get around to is an axonometric version. So you see the sea level rise coming into the city, particularly for New Orleans. It's a really dramatic visual. And there are a few other explorations on the same kind of issue that I think are there. Just about to wrap up here, and I'm looking forward to your questions and feedback, but I wanted to offer you all a call to action for what you can do. So this morning I purchased a carbon offset for my flight here. This is probably the one thing I do that has the biggest carbon footprint. And so I'd like to urge you all to go ahead and purchase a carbon offset for my flight from Boston. Overestimating is about $10, so there are a number of providers, and I would urge you all to do the same. So a huge thanks to my co-creators, Rachel, Natalia, Kathryn, to Sarah Williams, and Carlos, to their presenters here, to NACIS, and to Tacoma for having us. Thank you all so much.